Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy. Hey, friends! Welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Jamie.
Hello, hello!
Hey,
Happy New Year, my
girl.
pod mates!
You too, thank
It's
you.
2025.
I know. Hopefully it doesn't suck too bad.
Good riddance to 2024.
Amen to that.
Was a tough year for many of us.
Yeah.
And I'm optimistic that 2025 won't be a spicy fuck nugget.
I hope not.
I got that phrase from my friend Courtney. Hey, Court! She posted something, I don't know, last week or the week before, and it was like, "Good morning, you spicy little fuck nugget." And I was like, that. I'm obsessed. I have to use it. So 2025's not going to be a bad spicy fuck nugget. It's going to be an awesome spicy fuck nugget,
one.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are you drinking this evening?
It's called Clyde Mays Straight Bourbon Whiskey.
Clyde. Let me see that. Oh, Mays as an M-A-Y-S. Oh, M-A-Y apostrophe S.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it good?
I don't know who Clyde May is, but yes,
I don't either.
He makes a delicious bourbon.
That's great.
Yeah.
I was rooting around in my liqueur cabinet and I found a bottle of Woodford's Reserve. Is it Woodford's?
Or just Woodford?
Okay. Well, I found a bottle of Woodford Reserve because Woodford's Reserves doesn't exist. And I pulled it out and I was like, oh, I forgot I had this. Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers to you. Clink.
Clink. Oh, quick shout out to a friend of mine, ours, actually. You know her too, My, who recently got engaged.
Oh, she did?
She did. I love. Congratulations, My.
Aw.
Congratulations.
She's the sweetest. Congratulations. That's awesome. That makes me really happy. She's one of the good ones for damn sure.
She's the one that, like, all the good stuff should happen, right? She deserves all the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, pivoting.
Pivot.
The case we're working through this evening is really uncomfortable and unsettling.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. At least for me. Most true crime cases evoke lots of different feelings. Discomfort and not being settled aren't the only feelings I have, certainly because this case centers around the use of the death penalty and blatant and rampant racism and discrimination.
Fucking hate it already.
Yep. And what's sad is this case takes place in 1952.
Yeah, you could have said all of those things and you could have said this was last year and I wouldn't have fucking surprised me.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. You would have thought that in the span of 73 years, we would have made a hell of a lot more progress than we have actually made. Yeah. Because this shit happens every single day still.
Yeah.
Today.
It's infuriating.
In today's day and age. It's disgusting. It feels like we haven't made. It's like we've just been sitting and spinning.
Yeah.
We're going to pop across the pond. This case takes place in the UK.
Okay.
Lily Volpert was a lovely young Jewish lady of Russian descent. Well, young compared to today's standards. Horribly matronly compared to 1950s standards. In March 1952, the 41-year-old,
spinster.
She was called a spinster in the source materials. I didn't want to use that name. I refuse, but in March 1952, the 41-year-old Lily was doing what she had done nearly every day for the last 25 years. She was working in and she was managing Volpert's clothing store at 203-204 Bute Street in Cardiff, Wales, that her father, Mark, had devoted most of his life to. Mark Volpert moved to Cardiff from Russia in 1904 and worked really hard to build a successful business. Despite its name, Volpert's was a general store that sold items and goods to make clothing rather than selling clothing itself.
Gotcha. Okay.
So think things like thread, buttons, scissors, things like that. Scissors? Sure. Okay. I meant zippers, but sure, scissors works.
You need those too if you're making shit.
Yeah, you totally. How are you supposed to cut the stuff without the scissors?
Exactly.
It was also a general store, so people could go in and buy everyday sundry items like cigarettes and matches and tobacco and things like that. And it was also a pawn shop. So this was
My
normal, I
goodness.
think, back in the day. So like people that needed money would sell things to Volperts. Volperts would buy them, and then the people could come back and repurchase back their item. It was
Right.
kind of like on loan, right? When Lily's father died on December 30th, 1948, he bequeathed ownership of the shop to her.
Wow. Okay.
So Lily is like a successful businesswoman
Yeah.
in 1952. It's pretty
That's awesome.
I find that pretty rad.
Yeah.
And she didn't stray far either. It seemed that her world was probably pretty small and basically was taken up with her family and the shop. The home she lived in was attached to the store. So great commute. She never married. And at the time of her death, she lived with her sister Doris and Doris's 10-year-old daughter Ruth. Doris was widowed. She had been married. Her husband had been killed. They had a daughter, Ruth. And so Doris and Doris's daughter Ruth lived with Lily in this home that was attached to the shop.
Okay.
Their mother, Doris and Lily's mother, Fanny, I love that name.
Me too.
She visited regularly, like pretty much every day. She would visit and she would help out in the shop, and then she would help out with housework. And so all three women were helping to like keep the shop, keep the house, and raise Ruth.
Oh,
It was kind of cool. They were close.
Yeah. It's like
And
a sitcom.
that would actually be a pretty cool sitcom.
Yeah.
But anyways, they were a tight-knit family. Lily was able to go between her home and the shop by way of what was described as a glass-paneled door. This door led from the shop directly into the dining room of the residence.
Oh, okay.
So you could see through the door, and I'm picturing, like circa early 1900s, late 1800s, like the beautiful wood with the inlaid glass panes that are like rippled because it's not the glass that we have today. It's that old style stuff and just like super beautiful. I feel like that's the way the door looked. So that door was like the gateway between the residence and the shop.
Wow. So some guys in there like, I need a pack of tobacco, and like look over and there's somebody eating fucking soup like through the
Exactly.
like,
Yes.
hey ma'am. Whatever. You're just like, God, just trying to eat some soup over here. Fuck.
Is that beef stew? For those of you familiar with Cardiff, Wales, I am not. But Volpert's was located in what was known as the Docklands area of Cardiff. This area was also known as Tiger Bay and also known as the Docks District.
Well.
And Bute Street, where Volpert's was located, seemed to be sort of like a pretty thriving commerce area in the middle of that area of Cardiff.
Okay.
Volpert's was known as a haberdashery. I'm on a campaign, nay, a mission, to bring this word back to mainstream use. Haberdashery, a haberdasher. Why the fuck is this word not being used regularly?
I know. It's pretty cool.
It's cool. In British English, a haberdasher was a person who, or a haberdashery was a business who. So haberdasher was the person that worked like in the haberdashery. The haberdashery was the business that sold things to aid in sewing, knitting, dressmaking, things like that. That's what like the British English definition of haberdasher or haberdashery was. Interestingly, though, the United States decided to fuck it all up because they took this word and they used it to refer specifically to men's clothing stores that sold menswear, like suits and ties, dress shoes, things like that. I could get on my soapbox about gender biasness.
Right.
But we'll just eye roll hardcore and move on. Okay, so Volpert's was open most days, probably close to 7 days a week. And usually every evening it closed at 8, though Lily would often stay late to accommodate last minute customers. She
Hmm.
was nice like that. On March 6th, 1952, at around 8:15, 8:20 p.m., a neighbor from the area where Volpert's was located found Lily lying on the floor behind the counter of the store in a large pool of blood when he came by
Hmm.
to purchase cigarettes. Her throat had been sliced open by what was assumed to be a razor blade, though the murder weapon was never recovered. And as the bobbies descended, we
You
call them
really
police
just
officer. Yeah, I'm really like leaning in hard. I
you
love the
took
UK
the baton
so
and you
much.
fucking
I
launched
ran with
yourself
it.
with it.
Oh
Yeah,
my
big
God, I
time.
love the UK so much. So as the bobbies descended on the crime scene, you're like, yeah, I'm not doing this in a horrible British accent. Descended on the crime scene, it became apparent that robbery seemed the likely reason behind Lily's attack because roughly 100 to 130 euros was missing from the till, which today is like several thousands of euro. The investigation quickly got underway, and it was led by Chief Inspector Harry Power, and he had the help of Inspector Loudon Roberts. So the two of them were sort of leading it. And the police found an eyewitness who apparently saw a man leaving Volpert's the evening Lily was murdered. This eyewitness, a Jamaican named Harold, his last name is spelled Cover. So Cover. I don't know if it's pronounced cover or cover or cover. I don't know. I tried really hard. So we're going to go with cover.
Okay.
So a Jamaican named Harold Cover came forward and recounted to authorities that Mahmoud Mattan was the man he saw leaving the store. It would be Cover's eyewitness account that would be Mahmoud's undoing. On March 15th, 1952, 9 days after Lily's murder, police arrested Mahmoud and charged him with the murder of Lily Volpert. And just over 4 months later, on July 24th, 1952, Mahmoud was convicted of her murder. He immediately appealed his conviction. It was denied. That was on August 20th. 2 weeks later, on September 3rd, 1952, Mahmoud was executed by hanging.
Damn.
So, in the span of like 6 months, Lily was murdered, and Mahmoud was arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and executed for her murder.
Fuck.
Swift justice.
Yeah.
Maybe
My
a little too
God.
swift?
Yeah.
Now, I want to take you through the details of this case. And when I say details, ironically, if you search hard enough, there are quite a bit of sources that have incredible detail. The challenge, though, is that some of these sources conflict with other sources. So, over the years and with the reporting, it's unclear exactly if some of the more specific or salacious details are true. So, I left a lot of that out.
Right. Okay.
First, Lily's reputation was impeccable. She wasn't into mischief and nonsense. She did not put herself into compromising social situations, situations with men. She didn't have any known enemies. She just worked really hard in her store and took care of her family when she wasn't working. She had been a steward of the community for decades. So, to authorities, this really did rule out that this was a targeted attack against her, that this was specifically to kill Lily, and that it really was probably a robbery or an opportunity crime rather than a targeted crime.
Right.
Second, the area where Volpert's clothing store was located in the Docks district of Cardiff, or the Docklands, or Tiger Bay if you're nasty, that location hosted a rather sizable population of seamen from many different nationalities.
Okay.
Cardiff sits on Cardiff Bay, and at least in 1952, that was the main commercial center of Wales. So that made that area a very prominent thoroughfare and very busy, very populated. Lots of different people from all walks of life filtered through. And that lended itself to almost like a transient community because people came, people went. especially on and off the boats
Yeah.
that docked and moored there. Mahmoud Hussein Mattan was one of those that came and then stayed. He was born in 1923 in British Somaliland. So, British Somaliland, from what I understand, it doesn't exist anymore today because of like combining and with other territories and things like that. But at least in the 20s, British Somaliland was located in Eastern Africa and it sat right on the Gulf of Aden. So if you looked at a map and you looked at the country of Africa, it was like in the upper right hand part of the country, right on the coast, sitting right there on the Gulf of Aden. That was
Okay.
British Somaliland. And that's where Mahmoud was born. And eventually, when he was old enough, he joined the British Merchant Navy and he found himself in Cardiff. He moored there in Cardiff in 1946. He was 23 years old at the time. Right away, he met 17-year-old Laura Williams. Laura worked in a paper factory in Cardiff, which put her in the same general area as Mahmoud on a regular basis. And this was way before online dating. So it was the old school method where you just happen to bump into each other, call it chance, fate, destiny. Either way, their paths crossed. They took one look at each other. I'm speculating here, but they fell madly in love. And 3 months after meeting, they got married in
Aw.
1947. In 1948, they had their first son. They named him David. In 1949, their second son, Omar, was born. And in 1951, they welcomed their third and final child, a son they called Mervyn. But this was during the late 40s, early 50s. Interracial couples were not tolerated.
Hmm.
Interracial couples who went and had the gall to get married, let alone have children,
Right.
not tolerated. And Mahmoud and Laura were very frequently subjected to massive racial discrimination, hostility, and physical violence. They, for example, they couldn't walk down the street together, holding hands, not holding hands, because people would throw things at them,
Ugh, that's so
mostly
gross.
targeting Mahmoud because Laura was white. Mahmoud was Somali. And it was because of this that they didn't actually live together.
Hmm.
They lived in separate homes on the same street, raising their 3 boys between the 2 homes. Now, there are some sources that say and indicate that they were happily married. There are other sources that say that they were separated but amicable. There's one source that allegedly had a quote from Laura talking all about how they separated and why they separated. I was not able to verify that and validate that. But regardless, they were co parenting, if they were, very well, because they were still acting as a family, even though they were in 2 different homes because of the interracial contention.
Right. I hate shit like this.
Isn't it unsettling? That's what I mean. Like, it makes me very uncomfortable and it's very unsettling.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by,
Makes me
I
very
mean,
sad.
it's very sad. And it's also infuriating when we get, you know, more into the case on just things that we've learned that were done out of racial discrimination. In 1949, Mahmoud left the British Merchant Navy to stay in Cardiff, and he just ended up kind of working different jobs to support his family. You know, they had a family of 5, they were living in 2 different houses, and life marched on, and the Mattans raised their 3 sons despite the hostile discrimination that they faced on a daily basis. The first tremor to shake their world struck on March 6, 1952, after Lily's body was discovered in her store. As Cardiff City Police began their investigation, one of the first things they did was they halted ships from leaving or entering the docks. They were like, all right, let's just make sure that we're not trying to deal with people that weren't even here. Let's not let the people that were here leave. Okay, great start. We're on the right track. Then they began interviewing anybody and everybody that they could. Perfect. Interview everybody. Get all the stories that you can. This included interviewing Mahmoud. Mahmoud told police, I'm sorry, dudes, I wasn't anywhere near Volpert's clothing store that evening. I'm really sorry the lady was killed, but it wasn't me and I wasn't there. I had been at the cinema watching a film, and I was there until about 7:30 p.m. or so, and then I headed home. And they were like, "Oh, okay." They talked to a couple of other people. They talked to like 100 and some odd people, but I didn't go into all of that. I just pulled out some that were pertinent really
Right.
to the entire story. And two people that the Cardiff City Police talked to were two women who had visited the shop around 8 p.m. the night that Lily had been murdered. And it seemed that these two women were probably the last people to see Lily alive. And they were Mary Tolley and Margaret Bush. And when police interviewed them, both women said, nope, we were the only ones in the store. There wasn't anyone else in the shop with us. Four other unidentified witnesses the police questioned claimed that they saw a dark skinned man leaving the shop around the time Lily was murdered, but they weren't able to identify that dark skinned man as being Mahmoud Mattan. They were like, So Mahmoud and a bunch of other dark skinned Somalis were required to participate in what they called identification parades, where they would parade these men in front of eyewitnesses for purposes of identification. That was today's modern day, like, lineup where you
Right.
go and they're behind one way glass or whatever. Now they don't even really do that anymore. They do just photo lineup.
Mm-hmm.
But Mahmoud was a part of several identification parades. And these four witnesses were like, yep, we saw a dark skinned man leaving the shop around the time Lily was murdered. But no, there's no one in this lineup, including Mahmoud being in that lineup, that was this man. So they weren't even able to identify Mahmoud as being the man that they saw. Another witness, a 12-year-old named Joyce Blackmore, stated that she also saw a dark skinned man she thought might be a Somali leaving Volpert, but that Mahmoud was not the man that she saw.
Okay.
So as police are doing their investigation, it's like, Mahmoud's not the guy.
Right.
Right? Okay. Now, what's interesting is that Doris, Lily's sister, Fanny, her mom, and Doris's daughter Ruth had all seen a last-minute customer that night. And this was due to two reasons. Yeah, I see the look on your face. Let me explain. It's kind of it's neat how this kind of all worked its way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let me explain. Okay. First, Lily had actually closed the shop around 8 p.m. that evening after Mary Tolley and Margaret Bush had left and had walked into the dining room of the house from the shop through that glass paneled door and joined her sister, mother, and niece at the dining room table for dinner. So everyone was gathered in the dining room. That's important because, secondly, the glass paneled door leading into the dining room was directly across from the entrance door into the shop. So if you were in the dining room, you could look through the glass paneled door all the way through the store to the front of the store to the front door entrance to the shop.
Eating your soup, you could be like, oh, there's a customer. Hang on.
Exactly. Which is probably why the door to the shop was placed there.
Yeah.
Because if you were sitting down or whatever,
Having tea.
having tea, that's what they do in the UK, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having tea, you could see if somebody was coming into the shop.
Yeah.
That's why they were able to see the last minute customer, because Lily had actually closed the store, but then the last minute customer rang the doorbell because the door was locked, and Lily went and opened the door. So Lily had just sat down for dinner that evening. The shop's doorbell rang. She got up and answered it. Doris, Fanny, and Ruth saw that there was a person there. They all told police that they had seen a man at the front door talking to Lily. When they gave descriptions of the man they saw, Doris and Fanny said they saw a Somali in dark clothing, but Ruth said she saw a different man, not a Somali, and the man that she saw was wearing a light-colored Macintosh. Oh, what is a Macintosh, you ask? A Macintosh is a brilliant way to say raincoat.
Oh.
So I'm no longer wearing raincoats. I'm wearing Macintoshes.
I figured.
So Ruth was saying, I saw a man wearing a light-colored raincoat, and he didn't seem like he was Somali, whereas Doris and Fanny saw a dark-skinned man wearing dark clothing. Very different eyewitness accounts from everybody in the same room. Proof positive, eyewitness accounts are junk.
Exactly.
right? You cannot, our brains are complicated and glorious and wonderful and will fuck you up. You know what I mean? Mind you, this was at night.
Mm-hmm.
It was March, so, 8:15, 8:20, 8 p.m. It's dark.
Right.
And I'm sorry to say, but if it's dark out and there's probably not a lot of ambient light out in the street in 1952, and the person has dark skin, how easy is it going to be to see details of that person
Right.
and what they look like?
Yeah. And just in general, too, as far as clothing and any sort of, like, if somebody's wearing a hat, like, it's,
Interesting that you were to bring a hat up.
oh my.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Now, another eyewitness by the name of May Gray. She was the owner of a secondhand clothing store about 1.5 miles from Volpert's. Her clothing store was located on Bridge Street in Cardiff for all of our UK listeners, if you're familiar with that area. She shared with investigators that Mahmoud had come into her shop to buy some clothes and was there between 8:30 p.m. and 9 p.m. Well, it would have been impossible for him to have been at Volpert's, kill Lily, and then make it 1.5 miles to May Gray's secondhand clothing store by 8:30. So this would seem like a very strong argument against Mahmoud having been Lily's killer. So now we've got lots of eyewitnesses saying, nope, that's not the guy I saw, or nope, I saw him someplace else. You've got Mahmoud saying, nope, I was at the cinema, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, police also questioned a witness named Harold Cover, who claimed he was near Lily's shop around 8:15 and very clearly saw Mahmoud Mattan walking away from the shop's front door into the street. Except Cover gave two different, very conflicting statements to the police. His first statement indicated that he saw a Somali with a gold tooth. I have no idea how you could see a gold tooth at night. Maybe what ambient light there was glinted off the gold tooth. Maybe he was closer than he thought. Maybe Harold Cover was involved. I don't know.
I'm picturing Joe Pesci in Home Alone. With his fucking gold tooth.
So he saw a Somali with a gold tooth who had no hat or overcoat, leaving Volpert's around the time Lily had been murdered, and that he identified that person he saw as Tahir Gas.
Okay.
Now,
who the fuck is that?
Right. Mahmoud did not have a gold tooth. And other eyewitnesses claiming to have seen Mahmoud that night said, oh, no, he was definitely wearing a hat and an overcoat. Now,
my goodness.
The whole hat and overcoat thing being a point that was stressed in the source material seemed odd to me. I was like, who the fuck cares if somebody was wearing a hat and an overcoat? 10 seconds flat, you can either have a hat and overcoat on or you can not have a hat and overcoat on.
Yeah.
But then I was like, okay, wait. In the late 40s, early 50s, I'm making an assumption that the fashion for men was such that it was improper to be outside in winter, at night especially, without a hat and an overcoat.
Yeah, makes sense.
It were more formal times back then.
Mm-hmm.
Every time they would go out, they would put a hat on and they would grab their overcoat, or if it were raining, a Macintosh.
Exactly.
I'm guessing that seeing a man outside in the middle of winter, this was March, at night with no hat or overcoat, would have been a detail that would have been like, that's weird. Where's his hat and overcoat? Do you know what I mean? And stood out to people.
Yeah. Especially being right on the coast. It's like breezy. They're right on the water. Like,
yeah. So I was like, okay, that was probably the culture and the fashion of the day back then. People were probably like, oh, my heavens, where is your Macintosh?
Yeah.
That was Cover's first statement. His second statement completely contradicted this first statement and was given to police after the Volpert family offered up a staggering €200 reward to help motivate the public to come forward with information that would lead to who killed Lily.
Wow.
That was a lot of money back then, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money now.
Yeah, I'd take it.
This is when Cover changed his statement. When the Volpert family put out a reward, this is when Volpert's changed his statement to say, oh, wait. I actually saw Mahmoud leaving the shop the night that Lily was killed. He was leaving that shop at about 8:15 p.m.
Bitch.
Yes. So at this point, what do police have? They've got nothing. Police have conflicting eyewitness accounts. They don't have any evidence. They don't have a murder investigation. Nobody's really giving any detail. Nobody really knew or saw anything. Starting to stall. They're getting a little antsy. So they turn their attention back to Mahmoud. According to some sources, there were claims that Mahmoud was a petty thief and that his account of when the film he saw at the cinema ended didn't line up with when the film actually ended. So the film, this is funny to me, because if I were him, I would have done the same thing. Apparently, the film that he saw at the cinema was called Steel Helmets. I'm not exactly sure if that's true. I saw it in a couple sources. That's one of those details that I'm like, is this true or not? But the name Steel Helmets cracked me up. But this film the showtime for this film was 2 hours, 45 minutes.
Jesus.
I can't sit still through a sitcom, let alone 2 hours, 45 minutes worth of.
He's like, I'm still bored.
So the way that they did it was they had showtimes that ran continuously. So if the show started at 3, it would end at 5:45 and immediately start up again. And it would end at 8:30 and immediately start up again. And they would have like 3-4 showings a day and they'd just run it continuously.
Okay.
So if he went to the 5:45 p.m. showing, it didn't get out. The film didn't get over until like 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, he's saying, oh yeah, I left the cinema at about 7:30. And the police are like, bah, you're lying because the film didn't end until 8:30. And I'm like, who the fuck is going to sit through a 2 hour and 45-minute film on Steel Helmets? He left early. Why is this so hard to understand? Everybody probably fucking left early. That's insane. Or maybe back then, 3-hour films was the way to do it. I don't know.
Did you look up this movie?
I sure didn't.
Because it might be like a war film or something. And you're like,
I'm making fun of it.
Are you picturing that it's just like, we're here at the Steel Helmet Factory. We're going to show you how it's done.
The Steel Helmet 1951 film. Let's see. It is a 1951 American war film. The opening credits roll on a U.S. Army steel helmet. There is a bullet hole on the left side. At last, it moves. The wearer peers out, then starts to inch his way up the steep to a grassy hill. Oh, past the bodies of other soldiers. Oh, okay, so this is a war film. So maybe I should just cool my boots and not make fun of a 2 hour and 45-minute war film. So it was a war film.
Judging books by their covers.
I'm judging books by a cover, but cut me some slack. That is a long fucking movie.
Sure is.
He probably left early, police. Bobbies. He probably left early. Additionally, when questioned by police, Mahmoud's landlord and another tenant in the house that Mahmoud rented a room in stated that, oh, no. He got home way later than just a little after 7:30 p.m., which is what Mahmoud claimed to police. He left the cinema around 7:30, went directly home.
Okay.
Right? He's like, nope, I was home. I left the cinema at 7:30. I went directly home. The cinema's not that far away. His landlord and his tenant, another tenant, are like, nah, he got home way after that. Although the specificity of what way after that meant was, I guess, lost in the annals of time. Right. I don't know.
Okay.
Police also re-interviewed the 2 women that were in the shop that evening, Mary Tolley and Margaret Bush. They showed them a photograph of Mahmoud, and while both said that they knew of him, they're like, yeah, we know who that guy is. We've seen him around. We haven't seen him for like a month, though. Like, it's been a really long time since we've seen him, and we certainly didn't see him at Volpert's the evening that Lily was killed. And the police were like, really? Are you sure? So they continued their questioning, and they were pressing both women pretty hard to remember if they saw Mahmoud around 8:15 p.m. on March 6th at Volpert's. Eventually, Mary Tolley changed her story and said, you know what? You're right. Yet, I think I do remember now that I'm really thinking about it, I do think I remember seeing him in the shop at the same time we were there.
Mary, God damn it.
Margaret Bush, on the other hand, stood by her original statement and said she didn't see anyone else in the shop when she was there. So with Mary Tolley's changed statement and Harold Cover's changed statement, that was enough for police. On March 15th, 9 days after Lily's death, they arrested Mahmoud and they charged him with her murder.
Oh my God.
It is alleged that police told Mahmoud he was going to go down for Lily's murder, whether he did it or not.
Cool. That's, wow. Okay.
If that truly was said, that's horrific.
Yeah, I'm sure that has been said by police way too
Probably-
many fucking times.
Again, this was one thing that I saw this in several different sources, but not in all sources. So who knows to the accuracy of this? Although, given the racism and the discrimination and the hostility towards non-white people in this area in the early 50s, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
So
no, that doesn't surprise me one bit, unfortunately.
When they arrested Mahmoud, they also wanted him to do another line, like another identification parade. And he was like, nah, I'll pass. I've already done like a handful for you. No one was able to identify me yet. Here we are. So they can identify me in court because I didn't do anything and I wasn't there. And so there's not going to be a way for them to identify me.
Good for him.
After being held in jail for about 4 months, Mahmoud's trial started on July 22nd, 1952. There was testimony that Mahmoud had been regularly seen with a knife or razor prior to Lily's murder, and that his possession of such was not for good intent.
Okay.
Harold Cover testified on behalf of the prosecution and shared again that he saw Mahmoud leaving Volpert's around 8:15 p.m. the evening Lily was murdered. The owner of that secondhand clothing store, May Gray, also testified to Mahmoud being in her store a mile and a half away from Volpert's between 8:30 and 9 p.m. So she stuck to her story. She testified to that. However, the prosecution was able to pretty effectively downplay her testimony because while she was fully aware of Lily's murder at the time that Lily's murder occurred, she did not come forward to share that Mahmoud had been in her store at a time that would have made it impossible for him to be the killer until after the €200 reward had been offered by the Volpert family.
These money-hungry turds.
Allegedly, May Gray got some of the reward money and Harold Cover got, allegedly, they split it. Each got €100. I don't know if that's true. It was only in like one or two sources. I'm not sure. Mary Tolley testified as well. But when she was asked to identify Mahmoud as the man she saw in Volpert's that evening, because remember, she originally said, nope, nobody else was in there. And then as the police were pressing, she's like, you know what? Now that I think about it, yes, you're right. Mahmoud was in the store at the same time we were. When she was testifying and she was pressed to say he was in the store when they were there, she said she couldn't because Mahmoud wasn't there. And so she went back to the original statement she had given the police on the stand. So she ultimately did the right thing.
Okay, so she told the truth.
Told the truth. Clearly, it was all about being pressured. And if you think about it, early 1950s, women were second-class citizens. You're being pressured by a male cop to say a certain thing. You're probably going to say that certain thing just to get him to shut up.
That shit still happens.
Every day. What wasn't shared with the court or the jury, who was all white, by the way, was Harold Cover's first statement identifying Tahir Gass as the individual leaving Volpert's around 8:15 the evening Lily was murdered. That information was never shared with the court or the jury. So the defense, the prosecution, the judge, the jury, no one knew about this first statement. It was only the police and Cover that knew about this first statement. The police also intentionally withheld from the jury and the defense the 4 witnesses who had been in the vicinity of Volpert's that evening that had all been unable to pick Mahmoud out of a lineup, out of that identification parade that they did. They withheld all of that. They withheld Mary Tolley's changed statements. They withheld the fact that Doris, Fanny, and Ruth were unable to identify Mahmoud as a man that they saw that evening after the police showed a photo of him to them. The police also altered the timing of statements to make the timeline fit Lily's killing by Mahmoud. By indicating that Mary Tully and Margaret Bush arrived at the store after the man rang the doorbell that made Lily get up from the dining room table, suggesting that the man never left the store, but instead hid and then killed Lily after Mary and Margaret concluded their business and left. They did that to make it line up with possibly Mahmoud being the one that hid, and that's why nobody identified him, or some shit like that.
Yeah. Jesus.
The icing on the cake was when Mahmoud's own defense barrister, Thomas Rise Roberts, called Mahmoud a, quote, half child of nature, a semi-civilized savage. He called Mahmoud this in his closing arguments.
Oh my God.
Isn't that disgusting?
Yes.
Allegedly, the prosecution gave one of the shortest closing statements of all time, of just 5 minutes, basically telling the jury that with everything they've heard, if they believed Harold Cover out of everything, then they must find Mahmoud guilty of Lily's murder. So on July 24th, 1952, after 3 days of trial and 90 minutes of deliberation by the all-white jury, Mahmoud was found guilty and sentenced to death.
Oh my God.
Mahmoud wrote a plea letter to the Home Secretary at the time. His name was David Maxwell Fyfe. Fyfe is spelled with a Y because it's British and it's amazing. The Home Secretary is the Secretary of State for the Home Department within the UK government. And it's actually a pretty senior and influential position. And it's still filled today. A female's filling it today.
Nice.
Heyo. Mahmoud maintained his innocence in this appeal for leniency to at least get the death penalty stayed or delayed or overturned or something. His appeal was denied. He was hanged at 9 a.m. on September 3rd, 1952, and to date remains the last person to be hanged at Cardiff Prison.
Wow.
In fact, very sadly, his wife, Laura, didn't even know that he had been sentenced to be hanged. She happened to find out from him when she visited him in his cell. The police didn't even tell her. She wasn't even in the room.
So she stood by his side though?
The whole time.
Oh.
And that's it. Mahmoud is dead, with not one piece of evidence supporting him being responsible for Lily's murder, and a seriously racist and corrupt police department that engaged in a cover-up.
Wow.
So now Laura Mattan was left with 3 young children, all of them under the age of 5, to look after while she's grieving this fucking sudden and unjust death of her husband. It sounds insane and crazy. And like I said, this shit still happens today.
Mm-hmm.
For the next 4+ decades, Laura and the Mattan family waged a battle to clear Mahmoud's name. It took 17 years before anything happened. And something pretty big happened. And that something was Harold Cover.
Motherfucker.
Harold Cover, the motherfucker who testified against Mahmoud and was the only eyewitness account that was shared at trial implicating Mahmoud in Lily's murder, which was 100% a lie.
Mm-hmm.
The eyewitness account that was 100% contradictory to Cover's first eyewitness account to police, and that only eyewitness account that helped hang Mahmoud for a crime he didn't commit, and which got Harold Cover something of a reward, like €100. But the jury and the defense, they didn't know that. Although, to be fair, an all-white jury for a Somali gentleman steeped in racism in the community, I don't know if they knew all the factors, if it would have changed anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
But with rampant racism, it was easy. It was easy for the jury to believe that Mahmoud was guilty. It was easy.
Yeah.
And it worked. And Mahmoud paid for this fucking tirade of a show of justice and the law with his own life.
Yeah.
Now, 17 years later, in 1969, Harold Cover was arrested and charged after trying to murder his own 18-year-old daughter.
What?
During an argument, he cut her throat with a razor blade.
That son of a bitch.
She was taken to hospital and she survived.
Oh my God.
Notice I didn't say to the hospital. I said to hospital.
Right.
The British way of saying it. It's the better way. Cover was sentenced to life in prison for the attempted murder of his daughter.
Okay.
Also, interestingly, in 1969, remember the two women, Mary Tolley and Margaret Bush?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I call her my bush.
So in 1969, Margaret Bush had actually signed an affidavit stating that she had seen Mahmoud in the town center the evening of Lily's murder at a time which would have made it impossible for him to have been the murderer.
Mm.
However, for some unknown reason, she withdrew her statement. So she didn't come forward in 1952. Then she said something in 1969, signed an affidavit. Then she withdrew the affidavit. So methinks she just didn't want to get involved.
Yeah, she's probably like, it's done. Like, I don't want to stir the pot.
Yeah.
But
Spent 17 years. The guy's dead.
Sucks.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, but help clear his fucking name. Come on, man.
Still, only Cover and the police knew that his initial eyewitness account placed to her gas to her gas at Volpert's the evening of Lily's murder at around 8:15 p.m. When Cover was convicted of attempted murder of his own daughter, people in the community started asking questions because many still clearly remembered Cover's involvement in Mahmoud's trial and basically being the only eyewitness account, the only anything upon which his guilty verdict was situated. Like basically 100% of his guilty verdict was Harold Cover's eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
And people started wondering if maybe Cover was the guy who had actually murdered Lily and that maybe Mahmoud was innocent all along.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
The mill started churning. Two journalists that worked at the then People newspaper, I don't think any relation to People magazine, decided this was a story they wanted to investigate. Again, this was 1969. They traveled to Cardiff and they began interviewing those that were in the community at the time or were eyewitnesses. They tracked down Margaret Bush, who by then had gotten married and was going by her married name of Margaret Campbell. And she told the journalists that she did remember seeing Mahmoud in the town center around the same time as Lily's murder. When they interviewed Mahmoud's wife, Laura, she told them that her brother-in-law told her that Cover told him in 1952 that the police had the wrong guy and he knew who had really killed Lily.
Whoa.
When the journalists published their article, the Home Office took notice and they looked into these new allegations and they're like, what the fuck? And the police were pretty reluctant to do any investigating into these claims. But they kind of did, I guess. I think they were like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll investigate. Oh, no, we investigated. We didn't really find anything.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they did or didn't do, the decision was made that there wasn't enough to reopen the case and reinvestigate. While I think the People newspaper investigative article set things in motion, what really caused Lily's murder case to be reinvestigated was due to the efforts of the Mattan family working diligently over almost 5 decades to clear Mahmoud's name. They never stopped. In 1994, 2 solicitors, Bernard and Lynn DeMaid, offered their assistance to the Mattan family, and because of their roles as solicitors, they were given access to really important case records and police files.
Oh, awesome.
Remember we learned about solicitors in episode 3 on Herbert Ross Armstrong?
I sure
Okay,
do.
rabbit holes come in handy sometimes, James. Okay. Okay. So they put together a petition, they being Bernard and Lynn DeMaid, the solicitors, they put together a petition to the Home Secretary outlining the facts of the case that were withheld or manipulated by police at the time, and that some testimony differed wildly from original statements. The smoking gun came from Inspector Loudon Roberts himself when notes written by him in 1952 were discovered. These notes summarized Harold Cover's original eyewitness account, where he had identified to her gas as the dark-skinned Somali that he had seen around 8:15 p.m. outside Volpert's the evening of Lily's murder. Cover's testimony was the only thing the jury had upon which they convicted Mahmoud, and which had been the only credible piece of quote-unquote evidence still considered to be in play. This petition was passed to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which then referred the case to the Court of Appeal on September 23, 1997, which subsequently ruled to vacate Mahmoud Mattan's conviction on February 24, 1998. 46 years after his death by hanging, Mahmoud was finally and officially exonerated.
Wow.
Lord Justice Rose of the Court of Appeals stated that the case was, quote, demonstrably flawed.
Yeah.
The Court of Appeal further stated that the evidence presented at trial, and, in my opinion, the lack of so much evidence that wasn't presented at trial, was unreliable, and that specifically the eyewitness account given by Harold Cover as evidence at trial was not credible.
Yeah. No shit.
Meanwhile, during this battle to clear Mahmoud's name, the Mattan family was also petitioning to exhume Mahmoud's body, which had been buried in a felon's grave at Cardiff Prison, and have him reburied in consecrated ground. The family won this battle finally, and in 1996, 2 years prior to when his name was cleared, Mahmoud's body was exhumed and reburied in a cemetery in Cardiff. Mahmoud's gravestone reads, husband of Laura, father of David, Omar, and Mervyn, killed by injustice. So, with Mahmoud's involvement in Lily's murder finally cleared, her case reverted back to unsolved. Because we still have Lily as a victim here.
Right, yeah.
Which the police, in my opinion, did a huge disservice to, because they were so intent on nailing Mahmoud for this that they didn't actually do a thorough investigation to find her killer.
Yeah, it's like they were sidetracked trying to murder him, that they forgot what their whole purpose was.
Yeah. Yes, that they were supposed to protect and serve, right?
Yeah.
To date, no one has been charged with Lily's death. I wonder if it was to her gas. Who knows? Who knows if Harold Cover was telling the truth when he initially claimed, oh, yeah, I totally saw gas.
I think it was him. I think it was him all day long.
Here's a bit of information about gas, though.
Okay.
After Lily's murder, Gas started to behave more erratically and more violently. In hindsight, what people were seeing was probably some serious mental illness with Gas, though in the 1950s, mental illness was not a thing. Like, you didn't talk about it.
Yeah, you're just weird or crazy or whatever. You're
extraordinarily taboo. Yes, yeah. Just over 2 years later, after Lily's death in the summer of 1954, Gas viciously stabbed and killed a man named Granville George Jenkins, assumingly unprovoked.
Whoa.
Jenkins was walking down an isolated country road with a horse. He was leading a horse somewhere. I'm not sure
water.
Jenkins... Yeah, maybe. Could he make him drink, though? I don't know.
We'll see. I don't know.
I'm not sure Gas even took the horse or like robbed Jenkins of anything. He also didn't make any attempt to hide what he had done. He basically stabbed and killed him. He just viciously, unprovokedly stabbed and killed him. And like didn't rob him, didn't take the horse, but he also didn't hide what he had done, because the police found Gas's jacket at the scene, and inside one of his pockets were, quote, official forms bearing his name. It's like,
wow,
like a big old neon sign going, I am the one who did it. Police tracked him down. Gas denied killing anyone. No one believed him. And he was arrested and charged with Jenkins' murder. In
Okay.
November 1954, Gass went on trial, and it was determined he suffered from, quote, schizophrenia and experiencing delusions,
Hmm.
and that he did not have a clear understanding of what he did or that it was wrong. He was found, quote, guilty but insane, which is not my preferred way of saying it, but that's how they phrased it back then. And he was sent to Broadmoor, which is what we would call today a mental health facility. He was sent there for treatment. Less than a year later, though, he was discharged and he moved back to British Somaliland, which is where he was from. And poof, there is no known record of whatever happened to him after that. He's lost to history. So maybe it was Gass who killed Lily. Maybe it was
Yeah.
Cover. He
Hmm.
actually had a mustache at the time. So there was an eyewitness account that was like, I saw a dark skinned Somali man with a mustache. He was like really tall, like 6 feet, which apparently was out of the ordinary in 1952. Cover had a mustache. He was Somali and he was 6 feet. So I don't know. Maybe he was the one.
Yeah.
Gass or Cover, I don't think we're too far off the mark there.
No, it would have to be one of those assholes. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if Cover was the one that did it and was like blaming Gass.
Yeah. Like this will be easy.
Yeah. In 2001, the Mattan family received 725,000 euros in compensation for the unjust execution carried out against Mahmoud. This recompense was the first of its kind to be awarded to the family of a wrongly executed person. And yet still, as of 2001, no apology was given to the Mattan family or Lily's family, for that matter. Let's not forget, Lily was murdered and the police didn't give a flying fuck about actually trying to find who killed her. On September 4th, 2020, a vigil was held outside the Cardiff Prison in remembrance of Mahmoud Mattan, 68 years after he had been hanged. His granddaughter, Natasha Gretsch or Grek, it's one of the two, said, quote, everybody knew that my grandfather was innocent. My mom and dad always said the impact it had on the community was really awful. Mahmoud's sons were ridiculed, bullied, outcast. They couldn't do normal things. Everyone called them murderers' children. My dad hated that, especially later on in life when they actually pardoned him. All of those lost years, all of that time, things could have been so different for the three sons. They grew up without a father. In September 2022, more than 70 years after Mahmoud had been hanged, the South Wales Police Department issued a formal apology to the Mattan family. Chief Constable Jeremy Vaughan said, quote, this is a case very much of its time. Racism, bias, and prejudice would have been prevalent throughout society, including the criminal justice system. There is no doubt that Mahmoud Mattan was the victim of a miscarriage of justice as a result of a flawed prosecution of which policing was clearly a part. It is right and proper that an apology is made on behalf of policing for what went so badly wrong in this case 70 years ago and for the terrible suffering of Mr. Mattan's family and all those affected by this tragedy for many years.
Wow. Good. I mean, 70 years too late, but hey.
70 years too late, and no one was alive because sadly, the Mattan family didn't really fare well in the decades following Mahmoud's execution. It had such a profound and negative impact on Mahmoud's sons that they never really recovered. On March 9th, 2003, 53-year-old Omar was discovered washed up on an isolated beach in Scotland.
Aww.
His cause of death was ruled as drowning while intoxicated. He was 3 times the drink drive limit, and the only item found by his body was a bottle of whiskey, which was about half full. It was known that Omar described what happened to his father as a, quote, cancerous growth in his head. In 2011, 8 years after having to identify his brother Omar's body, Mervyn was found dead in his home after years of struggling with alcoholism. 3 years later, in 2014, David died after a brief bout with illness. Laura Mattan died peacefully in 2008 at the age of 78. So even though the police issued an apology, Laura, David, Omar, and Mervyn weren't alive to hear it. Their children and grandchildren were. But despite the apology and the compensation, they still bear the heavy weight of what happened to Mahmoud and how that was probably a contributing factor in the deaths of Omar and Mervyn.
Yeah.
Hanging as a form of execution was suspended in the UK in 1965 and eliminated altogether in 1973 in Northern Ireland. In 2004, the UK abolished the death penalty altogether.
Wow.
That's the very sad murder case, really, of Mahmoud Mattan.
Yeah.
And Lily Volpert.
And his sons. I totally attribute those deaths to the injustice of this case.
Yeah.
From the very beginning. That is fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And infuriating at the same time.
Yeah. And I mean, this is why the death penalty and the idea of the death penalty is so challenging for a lot of us.
Yeah.
To get our minds wrapped around the legitimacy of utilizing the death penalty, because death is forever. It's permanent. You can't undo it.
Man.
And that is the horrifying story of Mahmoud Hussein Mattan, who was executed at Cardiff Prison for a murder he didn't commit. And the very sad murder of Lily Volpert, who to this day, her killer has not been brought to justice.
Yeah.
There's no way that person's still alive. And whoever killed Lily Volpert got away with it.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm sad.
So, well, as always, thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Please rate, review, subscribe if you feel so inclined. It really helps our show out.
Yeah, if you like us and you like the show, the best way to support it is to leave a positive rating, positive review. Wherever you're at, tell your friends, tell other true crime fans. That's what helps us the most. So we appreciate you guys.
Yeah. Happy 2025.
Yeah.
It's going to be a spicy fuck nugget of a year,
right?
But in a good way. In a good way.
Fingers crossed.
And with that, goodbye, Jamie.
Goodbye, Carrie. Thank God that was just water. If I blew my bourbon load already, I would be upset.
Oh, yikes.
That was me. That's my bad.
It's like when they got here, I got caught up in this tornado and I was getting butt fucked constantly, and then they just spit me out the other side.
It's a dream night.
I'll take a shower tomorrow. It's fine.
Really?
I don't know.
What time is it? 11? I'm like, what the fuck?